Good evening and welcome to the Holliston School Committee meeting for November 2nd, 2023. Since we do have some remote participation this evening, I will start off by reading the statement pursuant to the Governor's July 16th, 2022 Act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. The Holliston School Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting will be recorded and will be posted to the town's website as soon as possible in accordance with keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. At this time, a roll call of attendance will be taken. And we'll start with Sarah. Yes. Amanda.
Present.
Cynthia.
Present.
Lisa.
Present.
Dawn.
Present.
Minnie.
Present.
And I am present, Dan. So we are now called to order. We'll just quickly do the consent agenda. There's one amendment that I think we have, right?
Yeah, that the equity audit ended at 8:15, not at 10 p.m. on October 17th.
Yes.
And I have an amendment to the October 19th minutes.
Okay.
It says edits to the SOI letter were discussed and made during the meeting. Don made a motion to approve. Cynthia seconded. All in favor. I was absent.
She wasn't,
from
that's
that
right,
vote.
she wasn't here for that.
Okay, so let's make
I did
that.
not vote in favor of that.
So, Lisa, I know you're watching. If you could make those changes to those different sets of minutes, that would be great. And then, so we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda with the caveat of the minutes as amended.
Moved by Lisa.
Second?
This requires roll call. Sarah?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yeah.
Minnie? Minnie?
Yes.
And
Also,
that-
if I can add, the sound is really not very clear, so I can't hear half of the things. I don't know if it is an issue with
That's
the
not you.
phone or if the mics are far.
Okay, we'll try to talk louder. No, well, no, it's the mic is actually, yep. All right, thank you, Minnie. We'll try to talk louder. So that carries. So what we're going to do now is, because we have Jeriel here for a short presentation on the this Equity Audit Steering Committee, we're going to take that up from old business and take it out of order. And with that, I'll turn the what's that? No, just you go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Jeriel.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about, or at least give some frame of reference of where we're beginning. So, as we know, the equity audit was shared out at this point about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, with the community. We had a forum. From that piece, I'm going to be leading the steering committee as we move forward. I'm sure this won't be the first and the only time where I'm here. I look forward to coming and providing additional updates in the future. But I want to give some framing for where are we headed with this work. So one of the things I wanted to share is, at the very least, the purpose for this work. I see myself in this equity audit. What I mean is that I got into this work because of the equity audit. Specifically, thinking about what are the gaps, right? What are the, how to ensure that all of our students have access to the right supports they need, right, to be the best selves, to see themselves in the best way possible as they graduate our schools. What are the resources our educators need? What are the resources our families need? In many ways, that's why I got into education. That's why I became a school adjustment counselor, why I became an administrator. And I'm here excited to lead this next piece of the equity audit. So with that being said, the proposed purpose, and this will be discussed once we kind of get the steering committee going, but one of the pieces will be how do we ensure that we utilize this process, the recommendations that came out of the audit, as a way to drive change, to drive growth in our districts, right? Education is always about growing. It's always about continuing to enhance what we do. That's what this work's about. Specifically, how do we address the gaps that were called out in the audit? How do we think about access that was discussed in the audit? And then how do we think about identifying not just not just the aspects of the audit, but how do we start to move work forward and have actionable steps that we could see moving the district forward into the future. That's what this work's about. And then connecting it to the strategic plan, right? The mission within our strategic plan calls for us to collaboratively create a safe and inclusive environment that empowers all learners through innovative teaching and learning to be lifelong active global citizens. I would say we don't reach that milestone, we don't reach that goal if we are not actively working to create an equitable district, period. Where is this work beginning? One of the pieces that I'm wrestling with is how do we do this in an authentic way? So one of the things I wanted to share, what are some of the things I'm considering? So one of the things I'm considering is how I'm actually currently conducting interviews with staff members, with students, with community members and stakeholders to say, what would you like to see if equitable, what would you like to see in this district to create an equitable process? How do we ensure that the voices that the audit calls out are part of the conversation? Our BIPOC students and families, our students of low income, our students with learning disabilities, our students from the LGBTQ plus community. How do we ensure their voices are there? And not just the students, but our families' voices just as well. And the audit called for us to strategically ensure that they're at the table. So if we start talking about recommendations for how do we see those playing out in our district without those voices at the table, we're actually not living to where we want to go to with this work. So that has to be the beginning of this work. I'm also considering what are the pre-collaboration or the education needed, right? For instance, if we put a chair here and said, come join us, that may not feel equitable to who I'm asking to join. Do they feel comfortable engaging in this conversation? Do they feel comfortable engaging in a conversation about the topics that are discussed in the audit, right? So there's also almost like a pre-educational piece that I'm considering and think about how do I help those people who join this committee feel that they get fully engaged in that conversation around those pieces as well. I also want to learn from the past processes, right? So one of the things I'm looking at is how have other past school committee processes run? What were some of the strengths, but also what were some of the gaps, right? Also, to think about what does it look like for us to develop SMART goals. When I say SMART goals, not smart in the sense of like intelligent, but I'm saying that are strategic, that are measurable, that are ambitious, and that are realistic for this work. What are the resources of space and time necessary, right? One thing is to embark in a journey. Another one is to really think about what do we need throughout that journey. And if those things come up, how do I advocate for that, or what might be the vehicle for me to say supplies, et cetera. And the last piece is, and I mentioned it already, is that how do we think about ensuring the diverse voices are informing the process? That could be part of a whole committee. That could also be focus groups, right? I need to have conversations with different stakeholders to figure out what will feel right for them, to be able to best lend their voice, their perspective, to where do we take action as a district. So where are we? As of today, we're on number 2, right? I'm sharing with you kind of the prepping of all the prep pieces that I'm thinking about. The next piece will be to launch a steering committee, right? And that steering committee has a purpose, which is how do we go from the equity audit recommendations to living them, thinking about short-term and long-term steps, right? That's going to be the ask of this team that comes together. I then foresee, at the very least, my hope is that by February to come and give an update to the committee with, I'm hoping, representatives from the committee as well, right? Because this process will not just be, as a leader, my process, this will be our process. So I'm hoping to be able to come back and give a feedback here at the very least by February with just progress and what are the different things that we're talking about. We also were acknowledging that there needs to be cross-sector conversation. So here's what I mean. There's conversations around a coalition throughout the community. There's the equity audit work. There's also the curriculum review work that's happening every day. For me to engage in this work in silo doesn't make sense. It makes sense for me to be able to come back with the other committees and say, here's what we're working on. What are you working on? To make sure that we're informed, because there's multiple things happening all at once. So that'll be established. The next piece will be, I'm thinking at least, let's say 6 to 8 weeks after the first kind of share, I'll come back at least by April to give a preliminary recommendation as far as what are some of the things where we see this work going. Also done with the people from the steering committee, and then also starting to have conversations around what might be some of those goals that we see coming out for the short-term work. And then the last piece is to think about, I put TBD, because one of the things around for people who've engaged in kind of committee work, especially when you think about the intentionality of the inclusivity that we want in this committee, is I'm not exactly sure exactly when we will be done with the final report, but the goal is, at least at the April meeting, we'll be able to provide some feedback of where we're at as a team. The hope and the goal is that when we provide a final report, not only will we give recommendations for the 23-24 where we headed, but 24-25, right? Because when this report comes, that also means that we as a district start having conversations on what the professional development needs to look like. What's the collaboration need to look like? How do we align resources to move some of this work? All of that piece will be essential as we kind of make recommendations for the work. And then, you know, the goal, right? The goal that I'm bringing into this is just to be, in all honesty, to have an authentic process where we center the voices of students and families into the room, but we do it in a way in which we're hearing multiple perspectives on how to move this work. I see a committee with educators, administrators, parents, students, and stakeholders as part of that conversation. And I also see focus groups happening as well. Because I think the other piece is that I also want to make sure that families feel comfortable. They may not feel comfortable being part of a committee, but they might feel comfortable being part of a focus group, right? So I want to have multiple ways to get feedback on how to take action as a committee. And then the last piece that I'll share, can they see this? I just wanted to share, this will be coming out very shortly, but we've been in conjunction with several community partners, and we're actually going to be having a session on November 28th for the community that it talks about. It's going to be part of a three-part series around confronting hate in our community. Session 1 will be around understanding anti-Semitism in the Jewish experience. You can be in person or Zoom. And it's really meant to be a space where, as a community, we come together, we can learn together, engage together, and start to think about what does it look like for Holliston to come together and have strong responses and change the reality for the future of our kids. So more will be coming out about this, and I know Dr. Kuska will share this piece, but so far, that's where we're at with the next steps for this process. Did you want me to put it back up?
Only the committee wants, but that's great. I'm very proud that it is that my temple is the one that's hosting this, and I think that's really great. So with that, you're good, right? Are there any questions?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on recruitment?
I know it's really hard to reach all the different,
Yeah.
populations
So-
of people.
Yeah, and I will say, I could sit and type up a process of how I'm going to recruit people. But one of the things that I wanted to do before I just jumped into, I'm going to recruit people by sending an email and reaching out, is in all honesty, I wanted to reach out to students and families and ask them specifically, what would it feel like for you to engage in this process, right? Because I also don't want it to feel like I'm asking you to join just because I have a process. Right, I really want it to come across that we're asking you to join, not only because we want your feedback on where we take action on the equity audit, but also how are we going to ensure that like your voice continues to be a part of this, past this. So I already started this week, between this week and next week, I'm reaching out, I've reached out to educators, Holliston family, I'm going to be connecting with students, I'm talking tomorrow with our PTO president, just engaging different people around the perspective of how to best do that. And start from there.
Okay. So I'm guessing you're going to work with Diverse Holliston to some extent too, since they're a resource.
Diverse Holliston will be a community group that I engage with. I've been engaged with them, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't just an engagement because of this process, but I'm also engaging with Holliston Family Services. I'm also engaging with our Drug Task Force Coalition. I'm also engaging with our town. My hope is that we at the very least have a school committee representative there too, so hopefully that voice will be there too. So it'll be a multitude of voices, yeah.
Could I suggest another group?
Sure.
CPAC,
Yep.
Special Education Parent Advisory Council, because I think it'd be really great if we could get a student who's on an IEP, somebody who has had that experience and can share that as well. I mean, we want to get obviously a broad representation of a lot of different groups, but.
But a big portion of the audit was talking about how students with special needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so having, if we could find, a parent with that experience, or ideally high schooler, or both,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
And that's also where focus groups can also play a part, right? Because we also acknowledge that one student's voice or two students or two parents' voices not speak for all of the voices. So I think also thinking about like inclusion of voices in the process, but also how do I go to a group of voices also to hear more perspective? So it'll probably be a little bit of both for any one of those communities that I shared.
And then I have another question. It may not be a question for you, but I just want to check in on where are we with, we had talked about making some corrections to the equity audit and getting those done. How?
So I sent the corrections that I had, and Mindy has those, and they're all set, but I was waiting to hear if there were any other corrections, so I did reach out.
Yeah, I apologize that it's been a busy 2 weeks, so I need to do that. But knowing that she's trying to finalize it so we can get it onto the website, I'll try to get that wrapped up in the next couple of days. But yeah, I let that ball drop. Yes.
I have a question for Jerry. Hi. So you talked about having some preliminary discussions with us in February. Do you think that you might be at a point where you would have some idea in terms of any budget requirements we might have? Because if we're going to move this forward into the next year's 24-25 school year, it might be just like a ballpark idea, but I feel like it would be helpful to have that.
Yeah,
if you have anything that
that's
you
a
could
great
consider.
note, 'cause that's something that I can raise to the forefront, right, as we engage in conversations,
Yeah.
that there's some implications to that as well. But I also think that the work will be short term.
Yeah.
Where do we start here
Right.
now, September?
Right.
But also what's the long term of that
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? So I also think there'll have to be ongoing conversations of that as well. But that's a great piece to note. And as you're saying that I'm taking these pieces, I feel free to any school committee member to provide feedback, provide suggestions, et cetera. Students who are sitting here, if you want to provide feedback, I'm more than willing as well.
But some of it too could be like we have a professional development budget, right? So some of it could be
Yeah.
utilizing
Yeah.
those dollars towards for the
Exactly.
next year or something. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So not necessarily incremental, but as far
Right.
as
Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like your recruitment is already going really well. And feel free to reach out, I'm sure you're already doing this, to like other folks that can help you. For example, like teachers who are like leaders of like student groups on
Yeah,
campus, like the
right.
GSA leader or something like that, as well as
Yeah.
like, other folks in the community that might have connections. My question is, so this all sounds great. I'm a little bit nervous about, will specific initiatives be able to begin before April? You mentioned maybe focus groups, because some of the things that came up seemed really timely. An example that jumps to my mind is like recruitment, or not recruitment, but like advertisement of the Montessori and French immersion special programs into like underrepresented populations. Like that would have to be done before April
Yeah.
with kindergarten registration and that kind of thing. So will there be opportunities for like stuff that jumps to the forefront for you to sort of pass those off to either a focus group or, whatever school person is in charge to get those done sooner?
I believe there will be.
Yeah.
But I also, one of the things that I heard recently, and it was so impactful to me, we've all heard the term go slow to go fast, right? And someone said to me that really what we should be talking about is go slow to go far. And the reason why I found that so relevant is because I think that this work is about far, right? How do we continue to grow where we want to go? So in the process, there's definitely things we could bring to the forefront, but there's also another piece of like an authentic process that has to happen too. And what I mean by that is that as you bring people together who maybe have never worked together, there's a space of like, how do we build relation collaboration to get to those conversations? So there's the budget pieces, there's some of those recommendation pieces, but,
And maybe it's going to be a yes and. I just feel like I've been on this committee for so long, and you keep saying like, eventually we're going to do this, eventually we're going to do this, and it's just like meetings and meetings and meetings, and
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Nice to see that
I
in
also
action. I
encourage,
do see your point.
and this is I also encourage our central office team that if there's also items in there that are easy movable, that aren't like, let's engage in what we go with it.
yes.
There's no reason why we could not have conversations at the central office piece if it's just shifting something.
I think that's more what I'm saying.
Versus a theoretical, where do we start as a district?
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think some of it that's reflected in the report we are already doing and maybe go more deeply into. I also think the NEASC report, we'll be getting feedback on that shortly, and I think some of that might overlap as well, which will also maybe take us in a direction sooner than some of those recommendations.
Right, I just feel like we don't want to like hear this presentation and be like, oh, so it sounds like we should start looking at the high school schedule. It sounds like we should start recruiting Montessori differently. Let's start that now. Maybe it can be in effect for 2026. Like,
Yep.
I made my point. I made my point.
I get it.
Sorry.
I get it. They're real. Yeah.
All right, but can I just push back on that a little bit, Amanda? Because if you look at the trajectory of where we've come in the last several years, I know that, everything seems like it works at a snail's pace, but we went from, we looked at a need or a concern that we had in the district to deciding we were going to put budget into having a position such as Jerry Ells, hired him, brought him in, immediately started doing all these different steps. There's things like full-day kindergarten that we got done in the last couple of years. So there are things that are happening. I just know that at times, it feels like we're moving really slowly, but there is progress that's being made on these goals that we've had, that
For
we have.
sure,
So
for sure.
I
I
just
just feel like-
want to call that out a little bit because I think that, I don't want people to think that we're just all sitting here
No,
twiddling our
I don't
thumbs.
think that
A
at
lot
all.
of the action is taking place behind us and behind this business meeting. You know what I mean?
I know. I just feel like with DEI work and with the negative things we've been seeing in our community over the past several years, there is an urgency.
Yeah, and I think some of that might be addressed outside of the steering committee
Yeah, for
too,
sure.
so-
For sure.
Yeah.
But I guess what I appreciate is that we're now talking about it, because I got to say, like, my kids have said there's things that they've seen for years that we just never talked about. There were things that were said to them in the hallways or things that they read, but we never called attention to it. And now we're calling it out for what it is and saying we're not doing that anymore. So I think that's an important step.
And I
It's
think-
building capacity.
And I think
So-
sometimes, there's an assumption that because we're reporting and trying to be as transparent as possible, that it's increasing, and certainly there's recent events that have caused increases, but this is stuff that was happening when I was a child, and we just didn't go home and tell our parents. Nobody talked about it. I was talking to an administrator recently that was interviewing in a different district at one point, and they left that district and they did not accept the position because they saw very graphic N-words in the bathroom, and nothing was being done about it. So yes, we can always do better. We're always trying to improve. But it doesn't mean it didn't exist and just started since we've been doing this work. It's been there, and we need to do better. We need to keep calling it out, and we need to be as transparent as possible that it exists.
Sarah, do you have any questions? Minnie or Dawn, do you have any questions?
No questions?
No questions.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I just had a question. As you're conducting these preliminary interviews with members of the community and understanding how to best shape this process, are you sharing the feedback that they provide with others so that we're getting multiple perspectives in how to approach the solutions that they're offering?
Yeah. So what I'm doing is documenting their feedback. In all honesty, when I started talking with people, it wasn't I'm going to make your feedback public. It was, how can you help me be a stronger leader, right? How can you help me ensure this process is done in an equitable way? So what I probably think I can do is almost like go through and think about what are the trends and the suggestions that came out of that without kind of like outing people who shared their thoughts and comments as well. But I think there's definitely a space for that. Yeah.
Okay. That was a great question.
Yeah.
Jared, this is perfect. This is exactly sort of what I was hoping you could provide us and the community. Just a couple quick ones. Do you have any idea of the size of the steering group that you're looking at?
Yeah, I go back and forth every day. But one of the things that I am doing is that in my last few years, I've been able to engage with different processes with DESE. One is I'm part of a project called Influence 100, which is DESE's approach to training administrators like myself to become future superintendents. As part of that, I have some amazing coaches who've led some of this work nationwide. So I'm kind of talking with them around like what are some of the lessons they learned as they've done this in other spaces. And the other piece is a part of a new group, Dr. Kusk and myself, in which it's a collaboration led by Darnisa Monte Jackson, and another gentleman, but the purpose of it is to kind of enhance the relationship between superintendents and DI directors. Because one of the things that they found was that just because you create a role, it doesn't mean the role's living in the best way possible. It takes not only long-term vision and collaboration to really think of how to move it. So those are two other people who I'm also kind of reaching out to think about, have they worked with districts in Massachusetts that have done this work, and what suggestions and feedback do they have for me as well? So I've gone back and forth. Short to your question, say large can sometimes be intimidating for people to engage. Small sometimes limits the voices, right? So if I go small, focus group, so I'm going back and forth on that, but I'm asking actually people that, to be like, what would be the best way for not just you, but people who might necessarily be connected to your identity to best provide feedback, right? Is it a focus group or is it a large group? I'm wrestling with that. I don't have an answer.
Fair answer.
Yeah.
And then who makes the sort of the final decisions on membership? Is that
My understanding would be me.
okay?
Yeah.
Great. And then so you mentioned you're talking about a final report, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, this is kind of a living sort of work, and the work always continues, right? So one thing I'd sort of like to just be considered, if possible, is by the end of the school year, can we get some sort of interim sort of report, not a final report, but some sort of conclusionary report for the year that then sort of, as the work continues, and just, it can even be, we're still working on this here, right?
100%.
That kind of thing.
I love that you brought that up, because that was something I was thinking about, that, not to say I'm facilitating the process, but one of the things that's important to me is not only do we provide, let's say, a preliminary report and a final report, but we think about a structure for this to live long-term. I don't want to ask people to say, engage in a process with me. Thank you so much, I created a report. And so to me, I'd love to think about how this group of voices that come together to provide feedback can continue in some ways to connect and think about, because throughout the year next year, I'll be back here reporting what's the progress we're doing, right? That group can continue to provide feedback on how to best continue to move that work too. So there's a short term, and I think the long term is, how do we build a structure for us to continue to move it like a living document that you said.
Great. Any more questions on this? Okay. So since we have Jerry here, I just figured we're on the topic of DEI. I think if we could also sort of maybe conclude our conversation that we had last week on the sort of coalition task force. I don't know if people have had a chance to think about it more. If there's anyone that has any thoughts, insights on it.
I've thought about it a lot, and spoken to folks and thought about it. I think that, not that I have concrete answers or really any answers, but I think it does make sense for us as sort of town, at least on paper, leaders, to make some sort of public thing where we can address this stuff, because it's been going on for so long, we haven't seen progress. So I'm hoping we can, have a coalition. I know this is something that Dr. Kutzka is very passionate about, as are we, and so if we could have a coalition, you're just running a huge thing right now, the equity audit steering. So I don't know if you want to be in charge, if you want the school committee to own it and be in charge, everyone, or Susan. I know this is things we've all talked about last week, and I'd like to hear other people's thoughts, but ideally we could have Holliston community members, faith-based leaders in town, like you were saying, Susan, folks you've already talked to, volunteers, different things like that, all different stakeholders, and maybe it would even be someone from the school and someone from the community to co-facilitate this type of thing, so it wouldn't be schools alone, because what we really need is community conversations around these things, right? When they happen, community conversations, yes, it's the school's responsibility to address it, but it's also not just the school's responsibility to address it. And what we need is just action in the community. And we want to make sure that, there are deliverables, and we're held accountable for the work that we're doing. So ideally this would be something that would report out at school committee meetings, right? What's been happening, what we've been doing, what conversations have taken place, and similar to the equity audit steering committee, maybe in the spring, report out what has taken place and what's been done, and things like that. Yeah, I think we should make something happen.
So I can share with you some of the conversations Cheryl and I have had so far. We've met, I think, 3 times already for 2 reasons. We had started the thought of the coalition, framing this, as I had mentioned last time, reaching out to town community members, because what we were finding is that we cannot be owning all the work in the schools, and this really needs to be a community situation that we own this work together. At that point, I had talked to you a couple weeks ago about how Travis and I had met Kathleen Buckley, the Assistant Town Administrator, Jerry L., Jackie Weiner, and then we also added in Lieutenant Barrett from the police department. So the 5 of us have met 3 times now. One of the reasons that we were trying to think of what are the multiple needs. So the tier 1 needs we were looking at as what happens when an event happens on the school that might overlap. No, it always technically overlaps with the community, but there are some events that are very school specific that I might just communicate out myself, and we try to resolve and figure out how we're going to react in-house. But then there are other larger events that might happen that overextend in the community. So that's where this smaller group of 5 are coming in. We can actively meet very quickly, decide if we're going to collaborate in communication, or, for example, Jerry L. and Jackie, are they going to enlist some additional adjustment counselors to say from the school and the towns to come together to support students or staff depending on the event. So that's kind of our tier 1 thinking. And then Jackie and, let's see if I have it here. I put some slides together just because I had the names of Jackie and Travis had recommended some groups that we had talked about that might be helpful to have. Let me just put my screen up. Might be helpful, and it's probably very similar to what you're talking. I think we're talking
It included pretty much
almost the same thing. So let me just show you here. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of
You want to
overlap.
do the same thing as Jerry L's doing right now as
Well,
far as
so one of the
recruitment and
things
making
that-
sure all groups
Yeah.
are represented on this coalition.
Why is my thing now? Right, so that's the thing, because we have the bias, we have the work that Jerry L. is doing, we're trying not to duplicate efforts.
Right.
So we had talked about what the purpose might be of the coalition, to provide a space and opportunity for community leaders to come together collaboratively to discuss and respond to incidents of hate and bias in Holliston. Again, not Holliston Public Schools, in Holliston, with us being one branch of that. And then this is what the team had sort of designated, and it's very similar to what yours, thinking of the different groups in town and having a representative from each group sit there, so that's about 20 people. We think we've connected with the groups that we would be part of this, but there might be a group that we might have missed as well. So this is the kind of the list that group put together. So then the thought was the tier 2 would be this coalition might come together. We would be putting together information, sending it out about what the purpose is, what our intent is, to have a safe place for people to meet. Maybe it's a town hall, maybe we offer different places, maybe 2 or 3 of these types of meetings. But then that group might identify what are some other action steps that we want to do in the full community. So, for example, maybe this smaller group of 20 or so might say, we want to do a community forum around X. And then I would be saying, well, who can do that? Because this is where our bandwidth is getting so thin. We can't maybe manage that. And some of that almost is similar to what Jerry was talking about with the faith-based communities and Traverse Holliston are doing some of these events already. It's a nice overlap and connection. So that was our hope, is that we could get going pretty quickly and move forward so that we could start planning a meeting with this potential group. And we were going to reach out to the leaders of these groups and say, who would like to volunteer and who would you want to volunteer for that from your group?
One of the key pieces, just to, if you allow me to share, is to say that as the community's hearing it or seeing it, right, whatever video they're watching, the difference would be, right, is that this coalition would be addressing bias and hate in our community. The equity audit is going to start by our laser focus around the gaps and pieces of access identified in the audit, right? So one is starting here, the other one is starting there. I see these spaces coming together at some point, but that will be the difference, right? Is one is really jumping into the audit and thinking about access and resources for our kids, and the other one's thinking about bias and hate in our larger community.
And part of what Jerry and I have been struggling with when we've been having these conversations since Jerry L's arrived and even before, is who can we partner with specifically in the community? And this is where Travis and I, both being employees of the town, he did agree to he would like to co-facilitate this, and then Kathleen Buckley would be a backup if he was not available. I'm trying to not have Jerry L own this work, and that's part of that. I'll talk about the ready work that we're doing as well a little bit later. But the biggest thing we keep hearing is we cannot be using our Director of Equity to lead all of this work. They're one person. We all need to be leaders of this work. So that's, that's a partnership that Gerald and I are doing with the Mass Ready work, and I'll talk about the work with Darnisa a little bit later. But this is why I'm hoping to keep this off of Gerald. He may attend some of these events, but I'm not going to expect him to be at all of this.
Well, I would think, I'm sorry. I would think it would be important, I mean, obviously time permitting, but I think for you to be part of this, not lead this, but, I mean, I would like it to be, I don't want to say priority, but certainly, I mean, you are the director of SCL and equity, and this is right down the fairway, right? So, and I know you've got tons of different things going on,
Yep.
but.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in her description does not mean I disengage with the work. What it means is that I'm actively going to be leading and spearheading the equity audit, while also supporting the coalition. And I've been a part of all the meetings and conversations already, along with Jackie Weiner, too, who I would say is often at the forefront of this conversation also. So, but one of the key pieces that I know she'll talk about later is just a reflection that this, when we say equity work, when we say SEL, when we say DEI, this work has to be owned by every single person in this room, by our leaders, by our principals, by our teachers, by our central office, by our superintendent, by our school. Like, we all own this. And in that way, I welcome the leadership of leading this coalition piece while I lead this, but never disengaging, is the way I see it.
Amanda, you have one?
Yeah, so I'm hoping we could also get, like, it looks huge, but it should be huge. Like, when these events happen, we want, whether or not, the kid that makes a bad choice gets caught or not, we want the prevailing thinking and message in the town to everyone to be a wave of, oh, no, we don't allow that. We don't like that here. We are an accepting town, and we support folks who are hurt by this. We want that to be a huge message every single time. So I like that it's big. And I would also encourage us, if we could get our student leaders to be a part of this as well, or maybe if they're not like at every single meeting, to somehow be like at the forefront of spearheading these initiatives among the students, because we're talking about changing the culture and changing the thinking, right? So there are lots of student-led initiatives, and other schools are done, like, spread the word to end the word, and different things like that could be, that I'm sure there are a lot of really awesome students that are passionate about this work and would want to be involved to do, as far as proactive things, in addition to, the procedures and the policies that you've talked about, as far as how principal, superintendent, whatever leaders will address issues as they arise.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think the difference here is really, this is really about getting that bandwidth in the community, because that's where, like I said, we've been struggling the most.
Yeah.
And that co-facilitation is really important, because I don't want this to fall back on this is just a school thing, because we're already doing a lot, and it's not enough, right? So this is where we need, I think the partnership with Travis will really help with that, because they're also doing a strategic plan as well, as you know, and a lot of the work that they're embedding into that strategic plan, because I've been part of that process as well, is on equity. So this is also the biggest, how are we bringing in diversity on the town side and human resources, and that's where Kathleen Buckley comes in. So I think this is really, it's bigger than the schools if we do this. I mean, this is what this group is wanting to move forward and has started this work. So I think it's bigger than the schools, and that's what I would like it to be, versus it still falls on the school's shoulders.
Yeah, but we're trying to decide,
I just wanted to talk because she's
sorry.
one of our student leaders.
I just want to thank you for bringing that up. Like, I think it's very important to have students involved in these conversations, because these events did happen at the schools. So clearly, like, there's an issue within the schools. And we also think that, like, there's a lot of room for this issue to be addressed within the schools. Like, there are a lot of students who are passionate about stopping this. Like, there's the Hate Prevention Council that has started to meet with Mr. Taylor to kind of discuss how these events can be prevented in the future. And I know that English and history teachers have also been tasked with coming up with lesson plans that relate to, like, what these words are, why they're so hurtful. So I definitely encourage that students and staff are involved in these processes.
Sorry. That's a great point. We definitely want that.
So what are we trying to decide tonight, though?
Were you
I just want to piggyback on something Sarah said.
Okay, and then we'll get back
Could
to
the
that.
membership of this be able to be a little bit flexible, only because it's so hard to recruit like all different folks to have the bandwidth? So maybe if like we could allow for like, we find a new student who like really wants to get involved, or a teacher who says like, I'm actually really planning this unit that's with this purpose, that they could like somehow get on board with this after the fact, if we could be a little bit flexible about that, or subgroups.
Yeah. So I guess to Lisa's point, what are we deciding? I mean, I think that,
Yeah.
you know, my concerns are is that there has been a group in the past that started this work, and just the sort of the momentum and the buy-in didn't sort of persist.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is happening predominantly at the schools, in the schools, on school grounds. The schools need to be, and schools need to be leaders here, right? And so you've got the administration, who are obviously the head of the schools, but we're sort of that oversight council, if you will. And so I think it's very important that we play a very active role in this. And so if we're not going to do our sort of an advisory committee of the school committee, and I do, you know, hear the counter arguments to that and can see the benefits there, I think that what my recommendation would be is that tonight we vote to appoint 2 members to be members, liaison, whatever we call it, but that are full sort of participants in this group. That we vote to sort of have this on the agenda every single time we meet, and that we look for a consistent update on what is being done, when the meetings were, how things happened. That this group post their meetings in advance of the meetings, so the public can be made aware that these meetings are going on, that the meetings be recorded, posted to the town's website. I don't think we necessarily need to require minutes, but that at least there's video of the meetings that is posted to the town website, like all public meetings. And I think that's, you know, sort of the most important parts, is that we have membership, that we have transparency, and that we have continued sort of accountability and oversight from the school committee. So
I just have to clarify, I can't speak for this committee because this is not mine. This is, right now, this is a town committee. So I think you're talking about something different. This is not what, I just want to clarify, that's not what this group was talking about. The part of the reason of not having this as a public tape meeting is to be able to have people be honest about what the needs are, and then create some of these forums where we can have the more open discussions. So I think you're talking something a little different, and I would want, I can't speak for them because this is not just something that I own. This is something.
But Susan, you were asking for school committee.
Absolutely.
So you would like 1 or 2 of us to maybe, if we can.
We would try to keep it at the 1 per, to
Okay,
have equity and not overload.
So the school committee has the members have a lot on their plate, and I think that it's important that we have two members there. And if recording is not, I can understand the recording issue. I guess I think that maybe just publicly posting the meetings, and at least to ensure that the community knows in advance that these meetings are attending. What's that?
Yeah, that we're doing.
That we're doing that.
And sharing out at school committee meetings.
And then sharing out at school committee meetings on a meeting by meeting basis. And that, again, just, you know, for clarity, you know, that if we grow concerned and we think we need to take more active measures, we do obviously always have the ability to create an advisory committee.
So the other thing about an advisory committee, though, is that the advisory committees cannot be a standing committee of the school committee. So it's just like you can have it for a short period of time, which is like a year, but you can't have an ongoing advisory
The policy
committee.
doesn't actually state that there's a.
It does
a
actually
time-
say you can't have a time, it says you cannot have it as a standing committee. So
Well-
it would be something that, you know, this is supposed to be ongoing work, so I think it's important that
Okay,
we.
we're talking about the minutia here. We could debate.
I mean, you're
whether we-
asking for advisory, and I'm saying that this is.
I'm not asking for
apply
advisory right now. I've given on that, but I'm trying to form a compromise here, Cynthia. So the only other thing too is I would like there to be some sort of report and documentation provided to the school committee by late April, early May, sort of summarizing not just obviously the things that we've talked about in the meetings, but that action steps and just sort of outcomes. And it may not be that that's the end. Hopefully that isn't the end. Hopefully we're continuing on with the work. But we do, well, the work always continues. It's just like with the steering group. We do need to, you know, have interim reports, if you will. So I guess at this time, so that we can move on, and because I don't want to keep our curriculum coordinators waiting too much longer, I guess I'd entertain a motion to appoint 2 members. Do I have 2 members, first of all, that would be interested?
I'm sorry.
Would 2 members that would be interested in joining the...
I would be interested, as we discussed, at the last meeting, I might like to be taken off another.
We can do that in a minute. We have that on there. So Sarah and Amanda, so that we appoint Sarah and Amanda as liaisons to the coalition, and that furthermore, we sort of, set expectations for meeting by meeting reports from the superintendent or the coalition, that the meetings be posted, and that we get a report by the end of beginning of April and end of May.
And that you'd be liaison, so like a primary and a secondary liaison. Yeah. I'm just saying, just so that they don't have an outsized role in their group. They have
Well, it's not
one
going to be
member.
a voting thing, so it's just going to be that they're...
No, I
part
think
of
the
process.
issue that I was hearing from the rest of the group was that if we stuck to one person, then it wouldn't, because now other people might say, well,
Yes.
why do they get 2? You know what I
Right,
mean?
exactly.
It's tricky, but.
Well, so that would be the motion that I would entertain. Obviously, if
Can
someone
you
wants to make another motion.
Detail that motion
Sure,
out
sure.
for me, because I don't know what all the things that you just said.
That we appoint Sarah and Amanda as liaisons to the coalition. That we set the expectation for
Posted meetings.
posted meetings, reports at all of our school committee meetings. It'll be sort of a,
Well, you have control of the agenda. so
yeah,
just put it-
but I'm just saying, like, that's we're setting the expectation now, so it's not a surprise to anybody. And that we have a comprehensive sort of overall report by the end of April, beginning of May. That would be the proposal, the motion.
Moved by Lisa, or seconded, or whatever.
No, move by, yeah. And then, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. That requires a roll call since we're still in hybrid. Sarah?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yeah.
Minnie? Minnie? Okay. I'm yes.
Carries.
That carries. Thank you very much.
Before we table this, so I'm assuming the liaison will do that report. I won't have to do the report, right?
That's fair.
That would make
We do
sense.
plenty of reports.
And then secondly, Jariel will be looking for, you may want to vote, remember, for that as well, because he's going to be looking for, so do you want to do that tonight or save that?
Let's get that. I don't know if anyone had
Can
thought
we
of it.
save that? Because my schedule may change, and I,
Okay.
yeah, I want to see whether or not I
Sure.
can fit that.
So, but we do need to figure that out, but that is one more role for us to tackle. So, just so we don't get on, and I promise I'm getting there. There's the reorganizative subcommittee, so I guess at this time, is there a sort of I guess, entertain a motion to replace Amanda with Lisa on the budget subcommittee?
So, I don't think we can do that, because don't I have to be on either budget,
You do. have to be on
policy,
one standing
or
committee.
superintendent's eval? Communications doesn't count.
Nope.
I don't believe that's written anywhere. If you don't want to, that's fine, but I'm
No,
just-
I don't want to be on budget.
Okay, so then we'll go ahead and...
I was going to say, you can keep
So
that.
then-
Subcommittees as
Okay,
possible.
then, if we think that it is if we think that it is a budget, we can first of all take a vote to waive our policy. So I'll entertain a motion to waive our policy.
Well, if that's the case, I'm not on any of those 3, right?
So I don't,
Oh.
yeah, so I don't,
we're just-
like,
That's fine.
so it's fine.
Okay, so it's fine.
Okay, so I'd entertain a motion to replace Amanda with, no, not replace, to exchange,
Replace.
to replace, okay.
Swap.
To swap.
Remove.
To remove Amanda and place Lisa on budget.
Moved by Amanda. Second?
Okay, roll call vote.
Yes.
Sarah, yes. Amanda?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Dawn?
Well, now you are on a standing
Minnie?
committee, so
Okay, Dan?
kudos to you.
Yes, so that carries.
Sure.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, getting back to our agenda. Thank you very much, Sherry. I really appreciate it. That was
Thank you for
you.
being here. I appreciate it.
that was really great. And so
All right,
report.
on to teaching and learning. Can we do that?
No, we have to report from. So report.
But they're here.
So are they.
They may have to study. I don't.
All
We'll
right,
take
we have
the
to hear
report
from the students. I'm happy to hear from the
representatives.
students, but I feel like we need
Students staying for the
to
meeting?
let them.
Yeah,
So-
we'll stay.
They're
You're
planning on
staying.
staying.
Oh, cool.
So it depends on.
So, because they might
Okay.
have questions after.
Right. So,
Yeah.
but we'll get through that. We'll get through public comment, and then we can go forward. So go ahead.
Okay, so just for some sports updates, girls cross country won the TBLs for the third year in a row, and are going on to playoffs. So yes, that's very exciting. And Holliston football is ranked number 2, and they just made it to the playoffs. So they will be having their first playoff game on Friday against Ashland. And then girls volleyball is also ranked 5th.
Okay. So senior dress up day was last Friday, and it was super fun. There was a wide range of costumes, and tomorrow is the end of term 1, so 25% of the way done with the year. We also have visits from college representatives coming to an end a couple more weeks into the month, and they have been a super valuable resource for seniors figuring out their college list and what they're interested in. And on behalf of the senior class, the 3 of us would like to extend a massive thank you to guidance counselors for helping us navigate the application process, as well as teachers for writing us recommendation letters and reading essays and all of those important things.
Yep. And the National Honor Society had their trick-or-treating for canned goods event, and we're proud to say that it was a success. Freshman elections for the Student Advisory Council were conducted recently, and Mr. List's school council, made up of students, staff, and parents, has started to meet to review the handbook.
Great. Thank you, guys. And so I think we have 2 people here for public comment. So if one of you could relinquish your seat for just a few minutes, that just would be great. I apologize.
I want me to sit here.
Somebody come sit here.
Someone could come sit here.
And then you can have Halloween candy.
There's a seat.
All right. So we'll just you can go, and we'll have public comment right next to me. So that'll be perfect.
Candy seat.
Robert, would you like to come up?
You can sit.
You can have Halloween candy.
You can sit an empty seat.
Some Halloween candy. And I don't know, we'll do, just be cognizant of the time, let's do 4 minutes, if you can.
Thank you, Robert Principe, 203 Turner Road, Holliston. 3 of my 6 grandchildren go to Holliston Public Schools, and they saved me all the Tootsie Rolls from trick-or-treating, so I'm very excited about that. So I'm here actually, as a community member as well as a member of Diverse Holliston, and we sent a statement in support of the upcoming work related to the equity audit to the school committee. And we also decided we wanted to be able to speak it publicly before the town as a whole. And so I'm going to say a little bit about that, and then a couple of comments about what I heard tonight. First and foremost, that I really appreciate Jariel's focus talking about, and I'm paraphrasing the letter, but basically, the audit, differently than people tend to look at gaps, is an opportunity for us. It's not a ding. It's great that we have unearthed, literally, the reality for populations underrepresented and thus underserved, right? So when you talk, that's the first piece that we're saying, good, we've done this. This is great, right? But what we do with it then is the next piece, and then certainly the first critical step, as Jariel has also pointed out, was happy to be here for his presentation, is we have to get representation from these groups that don't have a voice to understand what their experience is in having the gaps affect their families and their children. So very specifically, the BIPOC students of color, students with that are English language learners, students who are from economic disadvantage, free lunch, reduced lunch, et cetera, and then students with disabilities. I mean, if you just hear the names of those populations, they're not the ones that are, like on the neon signs. So there's got to be something different to get to understand what their issues are. And then also, certainly, as this coalition points out as well, is this additionally, that we have to get more of an understanding of these populations that have been targeted by hate in this town. LGBTQ, et cetera, the Jewish communities, non-white immigrant communities, et cetera. We need to hear their voices. And the challenge is to get those that don't feel safe to begin with to come forward and share what's going on. That's not an easy piece. And then finally, with the 92.6% white staff members in this district, what about faculty, BIPOC faculty, but faculty of color? Okay, their voices, by the nature of them being what I don't agree with the math. What's 92.6?
7.4.
A small percentage of folks that have a very different experience of a predominantly white community and school district like Holliston. What would it take to get them here, right? So, real important. We also added in a note about hearing about mental health issues via the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey. Again, information about community members and families and students that are challenged that way. We're very pleased to see Jariel in charge of this. And it is his identity and his cultural, ethnic, racial background, different than the majority of folks in this town, as well as his expertise and experience, years and years of focusing on taking gaps and turning into opportunities for change. Opportunities for change. We cannot, those of us that are experiencing creating the same results in this town, where these same populations are marginalized, don't have the expertise, period. Period. So that's why these voices and the leadership of Jariel are so important here. A couple things, if I could, just from what was said tonight. I really appreciate, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't know the student's name at the end of the table, but your piece about, students involved and the transparency. Tell us. That's so important, and there's no way any of this is going to work without student input, straight up student input, not as like, oh, let's have a student here and a student there. Students know so much about the truth about their schools, right? Okay, a huge resource for information. And then there's no question there's a link between the equity audit and this coalition for hate thing. There's no way they can't function together. I'm going to read one final piece, just 2 seconds. So the town is doing this, trying to do the same work. They're using and centering this is the Massachusetts Municipal Association. There's this whole guide they have, and let's just listen to this language that I know Travis has used, and Kathleen, to share with town leaders. For municipalities, the real work begins now. This is written around the time of George Floyd. We know the urgency has died since that tragedy in this country for change around DEI. It's faded enormously, okay? But that being said, we must push towards structural and sustainable change in our municipal governments. Schools are part of that. We must create spaces of belonging for those who have been left out of governmental policies and institutions or actively, intentionally harmed by them. We must imagine diversity, equity, inclusion as a core function of governance, not as an afterthought or the job of just one individual. I'm saying this because that's kind of the way we're positioned right now. Holliston is getting better at centering this as a core of what it needs to do, but it's not there yet by any means. We must have DEI be thought as everybody's responsibility. And I'm going to close with Jariel's comment about it's not about get this just done. It is immediacy with some things, but it is go far. The worst thing I've seen happen with these initiatives over and over again is you get it going, and it's not sustained. So that's the challenge that we face, and we need to get the voices that know about the door closed, the experience of trying to push that door open to get that sustainability that we don't understand for those that have access on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Thanks, Robert.
Appreciate it. Ms. Catone?
Thank you all. Hi, Jamie Catone. I'm a Holliston resident. I have children in Placentino and Miller. I'm a high school teacher, and I'm the president of the Holliston Federation of Teachers. I would be remiss if I did not comment on what was recently just discussed here at the committee and by a fellow resident here. So I'm just going to say this, in the moment, and then get to my public comment. This work is very important. Our teachers care deeply about equitable opportunities for all of our students. And so if there's any opportunity of including our staff voices, they have relationships with our students, and we care deeply about hearing directly from those marginalized groups of students and families. So if there's any opportunity for staff to be included in that, I know that we could really make progress quickly. These things have been seen by staff, and we want to be able to identify the problems that exist and work towards solutions for our staff. So I hope that didn't count against my time.
It did, but go ahead.
Okay. 285. That's how many staff members have started working at Holliston Public Schools over the last 3 years. 285. In a district that only currently employs 388 teachers and paraprofessionals. That's 73%. That is an average of 95 staff members in new positions each year over the last 3 years. But wait, that doesn't add up. That's because many of the 285 new hires didn't stay. We've had multiple people leave the same positions over and over. We've lost a total of 243 staff members in the last 3 years, which is 62% of our current number of positions. People started working here, and in less than 3 years, many decided that the unknown of a job hunt was more appealing than the security of the position they already had. Currently, of the staff who still work here, 75 teachers and 73 paraprofessionals have less than 3 years' experience with Holliston Public Schools. That's 27% of our current teachers and 64% of our current paraprofessionals. And this number is increasing daily. What does this constant turnover say about our organization? What impact does this have on education, on our students? For those who don't have school-age children, how will this affect our home values in 5 years from now? The recent niche ranking has Holliston Public Schools ranked at 51st in the best schools in the school districts in Massachusetts, behind Ashland, Sharon, Easton, and Medway. Hopkinton is number 1. The latest rankings of best school districts in Massachusetts haven't even included the data from the impact on this massive turnover. What will our rankings look like then? The implications of this path, if this current trend continues, are frightening. Older, experienced teachers will steadily reach retirement. Within a decade, you could be looking at a district comprised almost entirely of people still learning on the job. A transient district. This is the type of turnover we see in districts that have been seized by the state. The type of districts that should never be a thought in a place like Holliston. The good news is there's no reason this trend could not start to correct itself immediately. The numbers make it clear that teachers and paraprofessionals, new hires in particular, don't feel comfortable or supported here. There's no mystery to the causes, as teachers and paras have voiced their concerns to administration, to the school committee, at public meetings, to their union officials, anywhere they think they might be heard. And all it would take is a shift in a mindset toward creating solutions that already align with what parents and the district want for our students. Solving the problems that teachers are facing will shift the momentum in the right direction and create hope. People stick around when they have hope and when they feel like they are being respected. They need to know they are not disposable. And it's not me you're losing, or the 20 or 30-year veterans. We're just getting older. You're losing the French teacher who makes our French immersion program the success it is. You're losing the kindergarten teacher who should be the foundation of your child's school experience. You're losing the special ed teacher who can call on their decade of experience in the district to help your children learn how to read. You're losing the counselor who your middle schooler will turn to when they get overwhelmed with life and they need that trusted adult who knows them better than anyone to help them get back on track. You're losing the high school teacher who will write them the essay that gets them into their #1 college because they've taken the time to get to know your teenager. Your child will need them, but they might not be here. They'll be in some other district, and who knows who will be in their place. 285, a number reported by central office itself. You can stare at it and justify it all you want, but that won't change it. You can blame it on a nationwide hiring struggle, but we're not talking about hiring, we're talking about keeping. And you can chalk it up to COVID if you want, but at this point, the pandemic has about as much impact on a classroom on a day-to-day basis as the common cold. You can say we're just whining and teachers already have everything they need to thrive, but that won't change a thing. 285 will still be 285 and counting. I doubt our rival districts will disregard their shortcomings in a similar fashion. They will grow. We may not. It starts with hope, and hope starts with change. Change is like a functioning mentor program, proper training for paraprofessionals, reduced bureaucracy in designing curriculum, respecting the time teachers need to adequately prepare for their classes, and reducing obstacles for unified teachers to arts teachers to access IEPs, 504s, health plans. Most of these solutions are affordable and accessible right now. We have many important issues facing our district. How many of these issues can actually be addressed with this kind of turnover? We're at a tipping point. Which way are we going to go? Who is going to care? Who is going to make a plan? Or we can continue with the status quo, but now we see the grave truth of what the status quo brings us. 285. Thanks.
So I realized I skipped over school committee comments, but if you guys want, we can do that after the curriculum presentation.
I would like to get to teaching.
Yeah, and I apologize, guys. So when do we get to the teaching and learning? And again, my apologies for it being a little bit later than we were planning, but thank you.
Good evening. I'm lucky enough to have my district curriculum leaders here to present the incredible work they're doing. We have, from the left to the right, Joe Hicks, our pre-K through 12 plus humanities curriculum coordinator, Dr. Ida Pappas in the middle there, our pre-K through 12 plus unified arts curriculum coordinator, and finally James Lavasser, our pre-K through 12 plus STEM curriculum coordinator. So I'm going to walk you through a lot of information and get you caught up on what we're doing.
I am excited to start with some success stories. Just a caveat, last year we set as sort of our starting point core classes, and for the Unified Arts, those are the K through 8. So you're going to see a lot of things that have happened in K through 8 in the Unified Arts, as most of the high school are elective courses. So the first group that I was really excited about sharing with you are the K through 5 Spanish teachers. When I first met them, they basically invited me in immediately and said, please, we really want to do this work. We're really excited to actually collaborate across the two schools, the two elementary schools, and they felt like they wanted to be able to sort of dovetail that curriculum. What's actually really beautiful is that 50% of them are actually part-time. and yet they engaged in this work fully. We met once a week, and this is beyond our regular curriculum coordinating after school hours. But I'm really proud to say that by the end of the summer, they requested some summer hours. They are 100% complete in writing that curriculum and are now, I think, maybe spearheading the stage 2. They might be the first group moving on to stage 2, which is creating common assessments to all those units that they had just created last year. So hooray for them, and they're very excited and proud too. The K through 5 art group, which were really young, ambitious teachers, they had no curriculum handed to them, but they also didn't really have a lot of tools in their toolbox because they were so young. So we met regularly as well, and they developed their curriculum K through 5 100% too. But beyond just curriculum writing, we had, actually it was Monday, the French consulate invited some of our French immersion teachers to celebrate them. And there they told us that we were given this La Belle France Education distinction, which is basically a seal of excellence for French immersion programs all over the world. And so we were very proud to find that out just this week. We have been partnering with the French consulate all last year. We've met on and off, and we started forging a sort of smaller group with other French immersion school districts, and basically looking at resources and finding that pipeline for good teachers. That's really the reason that I started to reach out to the consulate in that area. We're very proud to say that as far as equity, having instruments, and really expensive instruments, the ones that parents who maybe are struggling to rent will choose a flute over maybe something that's a little more expensive. So I really advocated to get some of the more expensive and larger ones that are hard to put on the bus and maybe put in the back of a little VW Bug or whatever. The district purchased some instruments for us, and that is for our students to borrow. Anybody who needs an instrument is able to get one. At this point, across the schools, we share across all 3 of the schools. Matter of fact, my very first day, I walked into a rigging issue on the stage, which was a very expensive and very dire situation for safety. And I'm really proud to say not only did we get the rigging replaced, but there were a lot of safety hazards around the halls. Probably if you've walked those halls, you probably saw like lots of I would say steps and wood and all kinds of things that are considered a fire hazard. We've been able to clear a lot of things out and start sort of fresh. It feels really good in that performing arts hall in the high school for sure. I am very excited to add 3rd and 4th grade health curriculum. The Department of Education suggests that we have health K through 5, or actually obviously throughout school, but for the elementary K through 5. So adding the 3rd and 4th grade health curriculum actually is a huge step for us. And with, a focus on SEL, this is a perfect place for us to sort of embed that into the health curriculum. And then obviously, I am really excited to engage with the world language faculty in that curriculum review. There's a lot of things that have changed since the last time that it was done in 2011, including new standards. So we have a lot of work cut out for us. But yay for us. It was all good.
Thank you, Ida. You're doing great work. So just a couple of success stories. I'm really excited about some of the work that happened at the end of in the second part of last year and over the summer with ELA at the middle school. Each of the grades have undertaken the task of revising and adding in some new units and creating some really great opportunities for kids. 6th and 7th grade teachers are designed some literature circle units. The 6th grade iteration last year, and they were able to get books through PTO possibly grant, which was fantastic. Thank you to them. We're focused on novels and verse. And the 7th grade, they planned out a unit for their literature circle unit this year, focusing on overcoming adversity or overcoming obstacles. And they are also going to be working on writing a unit for a new book. For a whole class use. And then the 8th grade is, they're about done with the unit. They took a real hard look at what they have been doing for their first unit on the house on Mango Street, and they are producing and creating some wonderful vignettes in that style, which is great that kids are having the opportunity to really think about their own voice and how to express themselves. So I'm really excited about that. This year so far, I've begun the work of moving in the high school past the core classes and into some of the electives. History through film was a course that was great. It was taught by Joel Bernstein, who retired last year, and 2 new teachers have taken on that course and have made some changes. It was a wonderful course, and it was very much reflected who Joel was, and he had some great success in teaching the course, and the new folks that are doing it are looking at it and trying to make it as good for them as teachers and for their students as well. And they've developed 3 new units about how to look at history through film and do some comparison and think about how to evaluate film when it presents a historical moment and the accuracies and which one is best for use with students. And they're doing some really great work. The 3 units that they've worked on so far focus on the war in Afghanistan, how we view American business and strong leaders, and one on the civil rights movement. So I've been working on cataloging those and getting those ready to be publishable. And over the summer as well, Martha Going did some work to look at South America and how that's reflected in the world history curriculum for 6th grade. She started developing a new unit there, and we're going to continue doing that work. That would be taught the April, May, June time period of the school year. World history in Massachusetts, the standards are not always very worldly. They are still very Euro-y, which is not our fault, and we have to really look for opportunities to make sure that it is worldly. So I'm really excited about what that unit could look like and what it will do for our kids to really understand our world.
Thanks, Joe. So what I've been working on, working with new teachers at NTI, which is New Teacher Institute. We have some presentations and really working with teachers on understanding what UBD is and how to curricular map, and the idea of transfer and how to come up with transfer tasks. Supporting teachers through pilots of different curriculum resources in mathematics and soon in science. At the elementary school, they are piloting Envision, which they are currently using, but there's a new version, 2024, which they're piloting. They're also piloting Eureka Math Squared and iReady Math, so I'm supporting Ashley Bouchard, who's a curriculum specialist down there, with running those pilots. And it's going really well. Some of the teachers really like iReady and Eureka. Writing and mapping science curriculum with 3rd and 4th grade teachers. Anytime they have curricular time, they've had some release time from class, I've gone and met with them and really worked on trying to figure out the standards they need to cover the second half of the year. For those of you who don't know, science will be in the classroom in 3rd and 4th grade starting in January. So really writing the curriculum and figuring out what they're going to be teaching, what standards they're going to cover, what activities they're going to do. We really want it to be exciting type of science. We want them to come in and be really excited. We don't want it to be dry, boring videos and stuff. So we're trying to design curriculum that really excites the kids and teaches the standards. I'm currently running curriculum reviews in math, which is pretty big through the district. A lot of thought goes into those meetings, and a lot of great discussions are happening at those curriculum review meetings. That's been going on for a year. This is the 2nd year there. And then I'm also started science, technology, and engineering curriculum review, looking at curriculum from pre-K all the way up through 12. And then helping teachers in all grades at the high school, at the middle school, with the idea of transfer and how to write transfer tasks. As we finish stage 1 and transition to stage 2, those transfer tasks are going to be really important with their their assessments. So as I said, I'm running the mathematics curriculum review for the district. The first thing we did, this is a summary of what we've done so far. We assembled the mathematics curriculum review team for the district, and if you want to click on that link there, it'll bring up, if anyone's curious who's on the team, just briefly. You can see there's a lot, I'm not going to read them all, but there's a lot of teachers and administrators on this team. It's a full room when we get together. And some great discussions happen, but we have Joni Ron Taylor, Ann Canoni, Catherine Cooper, a new math teacher at the high school, Bob Timlin, the department leader of the high school, Cassandra Kogut-Taylor, Victoria Roy, Casey Conahan, Lori Kizik, Chris Venetian, Jen Dayton, Debs Mailing, David Kime, Ashley Pritchard, Carrie Propal, Katie Anderson, Christy Phipps, Nicole Lovell, Lindsay St. Aubin, Meg Nolan, Adrian Beaver, Kristen Marino, and myself. So it's a lot of people, but really great discussions. Everyone, like every grade level is represented and heard at these meetings. So first thing we did after assembling the team is create the vision of mathematics instruction, which is also linked here. I don't think I need to read it. It has the shared vision that we spent many meetings going through and figuring out and deciding what we want to write, and then how it looks in the classroom. So as we go through these pilots, we're applying this vision to make sure the pilot matches up with our vision and the effective elements of effective mathematics instruction, which if you scroll down a little bit more, we organized it to mimic the vision of a graduate, if you're familiar with that, with innovator, thinker, character, global citizen, and so forth. So that's on there if anyone wants to look at it in more detail later. We then created or completed a gap analysis, which basically we look at the standards covered in each course, at each grade level, and find out what's covered where. In some of the courses in the elementary, maybe geometry is the very end of the year. And so if that's for 3 or 4 years in a row, the kids might have a gap there in geometry. So we try to identify those gaps and then look at standardized tests and analyze any strengths and weaknesses in the program. We then use Curate and Ed reports along with our gap analysis, our vision, and what neighboring districts use for curriculum to narrow down curricular resources. There's hundreds of them out there. We narrowed it down to 3, as I mentioned before, at the elementary schools. The high school is looking at Envision and Reveal. And Rams, I think, is going to look at Reveal and possibly one other. They're still in the process of looking. Next steps are to get community feedback and use DESI's rubric to evaluate, choose, and implement which curriculum we'd like to, we decide we want, and then recommend that to the superintendent to pass on to school committee. So STE, Science, Technology, and Engineering, again, assembled a team. It's significantly smaller. You click on that link, it'll bring up the Placentine, or the elementary, I should say, science teachers, Julie Day and Laura Leonard. And we have Noel Tonelli. 3rd and 4th grade aren't represented. They haven't taught science in the classroom. So Julie Day and Laura Leonard are representing the 4th grade curriculum there. And then at Rams, I've got Carla Kraus, Jen Dayton, Katie Mason, and Nathan Rollins. And in the high school, Sylvia Bodmer, Amanda Rivera, Jamie Catone, Mari Golster, and Tom Levesque on the committee. So good representation throughout all the schools as well. We haven't gotten as far because this is the first year. We just started. We've only had 3 meetings. We've identified or developed our vision. We started to of STE instruction at Holliston Public Schools, and they want to just jump in and see what do we need. And so we spent about an hour with each school kind of talking about what they feel like they need, and then we started to do a gap analysis, and just like we did with math. Next steps, going to mimic what happened in math. We'll share out the gap analysis. So each school has kind of looked at the standards and each grade level and outlined which standards or highlighted which standards they cover. Now we're going to get together at our next meeting and talk about each school overall so everyone can see. And then we're going to look at areas of need, discuss solutions or possible changes, and then review curricular resources, and then pilot some stuff and make some decisions.
All right, so I did say that I was very excited about this world language review. The last one was done in 2011, so we definitely have a lot to reflect on. We've had only 1 meeting, so I can't say that we've accomplished much yet. We did get our team together. We have Claire Picard and Karen Torres Garcia and Michael Glenn from the elementary schools, Emily Rousseau from the middle school, Dylan Nass and Karine Portocarrara Heisler from the high school. So we have a pretty nice cross-section of French immersion, Spanish, and traditional French teachers. We started our vision of world language at Holliston. We'll probably go back and refine that. We started articulating our teaching philosophies, which I think is this is a really important point. And since coming to Holliston, this is where my education has been. Most schools think of world language as, you come in and you sit down and you're talking about the language and its structure and its grammar, and maybe you're learning about culture, whereas I've discovered is that the French immersion is completely interdisciplinary, and that is very different than most people who are prepared to teach world language. So that's like a learning curve for anybody who moves into this district, and for me, obviously. So I've spent the whole year meeting with Claire Picard to get my head around the very unique pedagogy of French immersion. So we're just starting to articulate that so that any new people who come into the district are brought up to speed pretty quickly about the difference between the three strands of language here. We identified areas of need that we are sort of putting on a parking lot in order to come back and make sure that we bring in the partners that we need to find some of these solutions. Some of it has to do with scheduling, some of it has to do with services for our students, et cetera, but every time that we're discussing, we have a place for all those ideas to get parked so we don't forget anything. We come back to it. Based on teacher suggestion throughout the district, I've been reaching out to different publishers for sample resources. We do not have a curate or an ed report for world language. Just yesterday, I spent the entire day with DESE at their conference trying to pull get some answers to some of my questions, but also find out what DESE suggested that we do as far as finding quality resources. So we have a huge pile in our room, and we're ready to use the DESE rubric to evaluate some of them. We see as our next steps, our meeting is coming up on the 14th, and we are interested in looking at the flow chart for how students get from one course to another. We're going to finalize our vision and our philosophy and sort of crosswalk that with the vision of a graduate for sure. We are definitely, since the equity audit came out, realizing that every single step we're going to need to have a little bit of a equity lens on it to see what things we need to sort of put in our parking lot to come back and make sure that we get some suggestions on how to move forward. And also just pulling in research. There's so much research happening in language acquisition that we want to just make sure that we are at the top of our game and informed.
So in ELA, we started our secondary review last year. We're going to reassemble in the next few weeks. One of the struggles this year in getting this work going again is that with so many of the things going on, when to meet and how to make sure we can meet for a chunk of time to get good work done is hard when you have so many teachers committed to doing the work in various different disciplines, and then pulling those teachers out of the classroom to do the work, and then what does that mean for a school to run? So we have been not able to get going as quickly as I would have liked, but we're going to reassemble in the next few weeks and continue our work, which is the 6th to 12th grade that we will be doing. We are continuing. Last year we created a vision for instruction and what we would like instruction to look like. We did a task text analysis of what are the things we're asking kids to do in class and what are the texts that we're using as the sources or the backbone of those tasks. ELA frameworks are very different than the science and the social studies and the math ones. In those other subjects, it's very specific. In algebra, you learn these things. In social studies, you cover these topics. In ELA, from late elementary up through high school, it's the same things over and over again with increasing complexity. They don't name specific books. They always say with texts that are appropriate across genres and grade level. But the writing and the thinking and the that students do over time does get more complex. So that's both liberating, but also can be very overwhelming when we think about what then are the books we should be using with our kids to teach these ideas. The foundation, of course, of all the ELA work is to make sure that our kids leave the schools with the dispositions of good readers, writers, and speakers and listeners, as well as a foundation in what do we do when we read literature and what does that mean for us. So that's the things that we wrestle with. We also want to make sure we commit to making sure kids know things about literature over time. There are fundamental things we value about American literature that we want to hold on to and not get lost in these state frameworks that can feel very generic, but it's still appropriate to focus in on what happens in America over time or what happens in world literature over time. So we're struggling with how to balance that. We also want to then move into a primary review this year. There's a lot of great work that has been happening at in the younger grades as we look at the most current research around science reading and evidence-based instruction and structured literacy. Jenny Mann has been doing fantastic work, and the staff there has been doing great work with introducing Haggerty and making sure that we're doing the things that are best for kids and make some key shifts away from balanced literacy to a structured literacy approach. It's really important. I'm really happy with those shifts. But we also need to do that, like a real hard look at us as a whole, and Jenny and Ilsa at Miller are very excited about us doing this review. The challenge, again, though, is that with math and science and world language happening, it's a lot to take on. So we are mindful of the commitments of people. So we're planning right now to get that, the three of us, to get the review started. We're going to start to determine the committee members. We were going to hopefully convene in very early January of 24. The first step of the review is to gather all the information about what we're doing right now, key findings, what are students experiencing in the classroom, what are the resources that we're using, and we feel like the three of us and members of the committee who want to and can engage in that can do a lot of that work and then present back to the committee as a whole, and then dive into next steps and big recommendations at the beginning of next year. So that's what the processes we're hoping to use. And then social studies, it's my favorite thing in that it's at my core as a social studies teacher. I come from literacy from a very personal place because my son has struggles there, and it's so important to have access to good literacy instruction for everything. But I also have a special place in my heart for social studies. We're hopefully going to start the review in the spring. We have one or two initial meetings to at least get through what is it that we want to see in our social studies instruction, what is our vision. Again, it's hard to do all the things at once, and we have to be mindful of what teachers can take on. But there are some things we need to talk about in social studies that's really important. Social studies instruction in elementary school is an incredibly important thing that is both connected, and you can do reading about social studies stuff in ways in elementary school, but also has its own set of ways of thinking that are really important that have to be explicitly taught too. So we have to hopefully figure out how we do that really well. The big thing that I am concerned about and thinking about a lot lately, I went to a DESE meeting today, is the 8th grade civics MCAS that is being field tested this year. All districts in the Commonwealth are required to field test the test this year. It will most likely be operational next year. The civics teachers are getting ready to do it. They are aware of what the requirements are. We're working through what the logistics are for what that field test means. There's requirements from DESE about what we have to do, and we're going to meet next week to figure out what we're going to do to meet those requirements and make sure that it's a smooth and fair process for our kids. The test that they've designed is, as far as standardized tests go, not the worst one I've ever seen. It's not a bad test. Like I've seen a lot of them, and it has some good design, which is good, and I'm excited about. And it's a lot for our 8th graders. They're going to be tested in all 4 subjects, and that makes me sad, but that's also beyond my control in this role, right? But the test itself is not horrible. And then at the high school, we're re-examining and thinking about how the high school civics student-led civics action project looks and exists, and making sure that we're doing the very best work there possible. Jen Lasher and I are attending a workshop next Tuesday to think about how we do that work better. So that's on the plate this year for social studies.
I'm glad to hear that. I knew Jen was going, but I didn't know
Yep.
And that's also to add to that, that is a DESI requirement of all
It's
high
state law.
schools. Yeah, that's state law.
That one's a state law.
So you know, yeah.
All students have to have the opportunity to participate in a student-led, nonpartisan civic action project in 8th grade and once in high school. And so we have to do the work to make sure that that is happening.
And how do you see that work being done presently right now in high school? Like, what opportunities do our high school students have now?
So right now, it exists mostly in the service learning class that Ms. Mills teaches and in the Global Citizens Program. And there's great things that are happening there. I met with a student last week who's very interested in doing work around anti-Semitism. She's brilliant, and it was a really great time talking with her. But we also recognize that that's not enough, and we have to have that opportunity available for all kids, and we have to make some shifts. And we're going to figure out what that means this year for better work next September.
Because right now it's an elective, so not every child has access to it, but we think we have some good ideas that we can rectify that.
We have a couple of very good ideas that we have to flesh out and make sure that we choose the best one, and that's going to require some more input from the various stakeholders.
Millis High School has been doing one for years.
Yeah.
So you might want to talk to them.
There's a lot of schools that have been doing it for years, and there's really great models. I actually had the opportunity to design that program for a school that I worked at previously from nothing to something that's really fantastic and has existed now for the better part of 15 years. So it's work that I love and I think is really important. I'm really excited about it. It's hard because it requires a lot of teachers, a lot of building of capacity for teachers to be able to lead students through that work. And that is doable, and I know teachers, and especially social studies teacher, want that because that's why we do social studies, because we want our kids to be participating in democracy. But it's still, there is work that has to happen. So.
And in looking at that for the future, you have a kid that's very focused in math and science, maybe can't spend 2 terms in a service learning or another type of class because it simply doesn't fit into their block schedule and their schedule within 4 years. Is there any capacity to build in projects like that into existing classes? AP US Gov, for example, like why couldn't you set up like a mentoring system or something where you'd be able to have that side project but build it into an existing class as opposed to having to carve out 2 terms for something specific?
Yeah, so one of the things that it has civics in the name, so then we automatically think it's a social studies thing. In very many ways, it absolutely is. And I would say there's also a lot of great projects that I've seen kids do that are not social studies, but really are rooted in science things and climate action and mental health, and it's wonderful. The trick with where you then place the task is it's going to have to be in a course that all students take, or in a series of courses that all students take, because then we can say all kids are being given the opportunity. And this is the guidance that DESI is giving us. So it's hard then to have it exist in, you could have it in all the grade, like one way to do it is like all 11th graders in their social studies class do the thing regardless of what the social studies class is, right? That could be an option. The struggle, though, is then when you have AP courses with very specific things that kids are going to be held accountable in a very specific way in May.
Prescribed.
It's hard then to do that, and I worry about then the impact there. So you have to look at what are the core courses that all kids take, and then sort of work your way from there about what then are those options. And that's what we're trying to figure out now. And I don't have we have some possibilities of what could be some good solutions, and we just have to continue to do the conversations with the people that would impact. And we're trying to figure that out right now, and I will be very happy to share with you once we've made those choices what that choice is. But I don't want to say more because then we don't know if that's going to be the best choice yet until we talk with everybody.
Obviously is involved in
Yes.
Superintendent Huska,
Yeah.
myself, right, Jen Lasher, all of that.
I wanted to, since you brought up the point of core classes that everyone takes, I wanted to mention that in high school, the 2 things that are immediately brought to the forefront of my mind are essay writing and foundations, which we take at the beginning of we take them our freshman year. And there aren't any core required classes that are a term that we take as seniors. And in my personal experience, I think I would have found it intimidating to take on a big service learning project. My first semester of high school, but as seniors, we've become more confident in ourselves and our ability to take on projects like that. And I'm wondering if there's any way for us to reconsider what's being taught in the 2 core classes that we take as freshmen and possibly think about pushing them to later on in our high school careers where we might have more capacity to take on big service learning projects and feel more confident in our ability to do so, having had years of experience.
So Saki, I can speak a little bit to that. I'm sure Joe can as well, but that is something we've questioned for a number of years as well, just because students have changed, needs have changed. I think a lot of I've heard from students as well that some of the work that you're doing in that foundations course is stuff that you've learned through attrition as you're coming up through
Right.
So yes, I think we recognize that, and those may be some areas that we can look at. So these are all some of the ideas that we're scoping out right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much for saying that. You're a senior now, right? So one of the things, and I thank you, I really, really appreciate it. I would be, as a freshman when I was growing up, be very scared to do the thing, just as you described, because I had no idea how to do it till very later. What really excites me is our 8th graders now are doing the thing.
Yeah.
Like they do, so like, yes, they're going to be much more equipped to do it than I ever was at that age. So I very much, I hear, because it is scary, right? And I totally agree. And our civics teachers in 8th grade are doing really great stuff to assuage those worries right now. So.
I just wanted to add on to that, and I'm glad that was exactly what I was hoping for, was student input. So to the ability that you can, a survey or getting more information from students about this, because it does give me pause when I hear it might be a class that everyone has to take in 11th grade history or something. I think I would hate this is an opportunity, right, to have kids to do a service project that they're passionate about. So if there's a way to fit that into psychology, if there's a way to fit that into science, if that's where their passion lies, if there's a way to fit it into art, if that's where their passion lies, I think that, to me, is more important than like a mandated course that all 10th graders or 11th graders all have to take the same history course, and we take away that flexibility of student choice with courses, because it's more important to have a service project that you care about and are passionate about. Otherwise, we're just doing this to check a box, right?
Right, and I absolutely agree. So don't take my next comment as any type of disagreement, because yes, absolutely. We want kids to do good work and be passionate about the things, and we want to find a way to do that. The struggle that I'm finding is the guidance that we get from DESE is really specific around these things, and I don't always necessarily like the guidance they're giving us, and I would like it to look very much like the way you're saying, and we have to figure out how we can do that and meet their parameters as well, right? And that's going to take some creative thinking. So their recommendation is that it either happens in a core class that all kids take, and we can identify what those are. It can happen in a series of electives as long as kids are required to take one of those electives. So we could say it can exist in A, B, C, and D as long as kids have to take one of those over the course of their time. Doing that then looks and feels very different, and is planning for that then changes in terms of like who then are the teachers, what are then the courses, what are how do we support that?
And you also have to support the teachers if you are the facilitator as a teacher of a service learning project, that's a totally different way of teaching than most people have been taught. So in order to do it in all subjects, that's a lot of professional development that involves a lot of teachers, which is not as realistic, to do that.
Might not allow them to cover the standards.
Correct.
Cover for them.
Right.
Correct.
So.
But it is within a district that's done project-based learning for many years too. So I just I'd love to have staff input into that.
Absolutely.
So, sorry.
Basically
done.
Oh,
I'm so
Cynthia might have a question.
sorry. Cynthia, no.
We'll come back to Cynthia first. At the end.
Are you sure?
Yes,
I didn't
I'm
mean to
totally
step
sure.
on your toe.
Yep.
I thought I was late.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So one of the things that people think that we
do is curriculum writing and filling boxes in, but our responsibilities are actually pretty broad, so we thought we would outline what some of them are. Obviously, you've noticed that we run curriculum reviews in each discipline, which is a huge amount of work, and they haven't been done for a very long time. All of us have joined DESE leadership in some way, meeting regularly with people in these disciplines to get guidance and to ask questions and to network, et cetera, and bringing those ideas back to the district. We're active members of DESE's implementation team, so we meet with DESE and they can basically walk us through some of these curriculum review expectations and things that they've put together, tools that they've put together for us. I know for me, I've been a liaison with a ton of different entities, the French consulate being one. I think I've met with them maybe 5 times last year. Obviously, putting together that application for our distinction with La Belle France Education, and the visiting French immersion schools come regularly because they love what we do, but it is a coordination feat, getting everybody sort of lined up and everybody informed as to who's coming and why and what's happening. Obviously, organizing PD, but I've been lucky enough to work with the districts around here. I pulled together eight different school districts to bring in a really world-class world language PD facilitator for an entire day's PD, which is very expensive, but with all these districts coming together, I think we got it down to like $35 a person. So we're very proud of that. And then the teachers are thrilled to have somebody that they really wanted to see. Facilitate writing grants. I know that Joni and I just worked on one that we're waiting to hear about through DESE to provide some funding for assessments, STAMPS assessments, particularly for our world language classrooms, to sort of start tracking our proficiency as they go through our courses, and then obviously leading curriculum writing after school with different groups, as well as during the day, during their prep times.
I like that also. That DESE Leadership Network has been amazing. Like, imagine like 50 or 60 leaders in math all in the room, and they're like, if you're doing a curriculum review, go over there, and you just go and you talk and network and see what's going on in other districts, see what other districts do. And then the emails, then they set up an email chain, and it's all back and forth and constantly get input from all districts in the state, which has been huge for me anyway. I don't know about you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a lot of time, but it's well spent.
Additionally, working to vertically align the curriculum, going through those, again, creating those stage 1 curriculum documents along with teachers, and then looking at them and using them in curriculum review meetings or whatever to align the curriculum. Provide professional development for teachers, support teachers in the classroom, where we go in the classroom frequently, help teachers, especially new teachers, trying to retain those teachers. Support teachers in piloting new curriculum, sit on hiring committees with principals and teachers, find teacher resources, publish newsletters, coordinate and work with principals, approve digital tools. So if a teacher wants to use some digital tool, it needs an agreement signed, privacy data agreement signed. So they actually fill out a Google form. It comes to us. We look at the curriculum side of that digital tool and approve it, and then Dan McLeod goes on and gets a digital privacy agreement. We also, this just applies to me, but the performance assessment for science, technology, and engineering in 5th grade and in 8th grade is actually changing. It's changing to be a performance assessment. So instead of being based on factual information, it's a performance assessment. So what that means, it's going to be very different. It's going to be about it's going to be about the like learning and using science more than factual information. So those practices, it's going to focus on those. And thank you. And so I went to training the last 2 days, and they trained me So I can then go back and train science teachers in 3, 4, 5, and then in 6, 7, 8 to use the simulations, and because it involves so basically a student gets asked a problem and there's a simulation they do, and that simulation produces data. They then analyze that data and then come up with conclusions based on that data. So they're actually doing stuff more than just regurgitating facts. So it's awesome. I've been excited about this.
Sorry, James, you're talking about the 8th grade science MCAS, or what was formerly known as 8th grade? Okay, thanks.
8th grade science MCAS, STE, Science, Technology, and Engineering MCAS in 8th grade and in 5th grade. So they take it in 5th grade and 8th grade, and then again in 9th grade. So they're changing the way they do the 5th and the 8th grade tests.
The commissioner's been promising that for years, and we're finally getting there.
So that's a plus column?
It's a definite plus.
It's going to be good, yeah.
Yes.
Once it's implemented in the
Definitely.
classrooms, we'll have the kids doing a lot more
Yes.
hands-on stuff, and that'll help with the assessment. So they train me and give me a lot of ideas of what can be done in the classroom to prepare kids for that test. So I'll be then training teachers in 3, 4, 5, and then in 6, 7, 8 as well.
So some of the other professional development work that's been happening, James has been working with grade 3 and 4 science teachers to write curriculum for implementation of science in the classroom come January. I've been working with the 3rd and 4th grade health teachers to write health curriculum for implementation in January. James is running, organizing and going to run a book study on building thinking classrooms in mathematics, and Ida's been working with Band on creative director. Aaron Snyder and Claire had this great idea about helping the French immersion teachers also make the shift to evidence structured literacy, which means something very different in French immersion instruction. And they were able to identify, and we were able to secure the funds to have some PD for that group over the course of the year to learn about those things in French, because it's the same ideas, but very different when you're in a different language. The scope and sequence of what gets taught and when and what the sounds are is just different. So they, once a month during their regularly scheduled common planning time on Wednesdays, they spend that half the time working with Kim Lockhart, I believe her name is, a great researcher out of Quebec. They meet via Zoom to do the work. It's fantastic. I'm so excited, and thank you to Aaron for finding and helping us identify that as a possibility. It's great. We're doing work with new teachers to make sure that they are getting the support that they need to do good thinking about what their curriculum and what their units can look like. We're working with teachers on PD days, and we're still, of course, doing the stage 1 stuff. That has not stopped.
And it was right into, segues into this. So